The haunted house next door. What we discovered took our breath away. In quiet neighborhoods, danger often hides behind familiar smiles. A new family moved into the house next door. A perfect couple with perfect children, always watching, always copying. They waved too long, smiled too wide, and stared at night through curtains that never closed. Everyone saw them as normal. But the truth was far worse. This is the story of what they really were, and how their presence destroyed everything forever. The house next door had been empty for years, a silent structure with peeling paint and overgrown grass that whispered in the wind. People in the neighborhood barely spoke of it, as if acknowledging it might awaken something better left asleep. But one morning, moving trucks appeared, doors flung open, boxes stacked high, and a seemingly perfect family stepped out. The mother, the father, and two children who looked nearly identical. Not twins, just unsettlingly alike. Too alike. The narrator watched from his window, noticing how their heads turned in unison, how none of them spoke as they unloaded belongings. The silence was chilling. No laughter from the children, no casual conversations, only the scrape of boxes across pavement. That night, the house next door was brightly lit, every window glowing, as if they feared darkness. Nothing felt normal. The first sign that something was wrong came on the second night. The narrator awoke, compelled to look outside. Across the yard, the new neighbors stood perfectly still in their yard. All four of them, staring directly at his window. They didn't move when he stepped back. Only when a cloud drifted past the moon did they turn together and walk in with robotic precision. The narrator told himself it was strange timing. People do odd things. Days passed, and their presence only grew weirder. The children walked in synchronized patterns, heads up, eyes locked on anyone who passed. The mother tended the garden, but never touched the soil. Her hand hovered slightly above it, yet plants seemed to grow anyway. The father stood at the window for hours, staring like a scientist studying the world. The narrator tried to ignore them, but it gnawed at him. Every time he glanced outside, one of them was almost always already watching. One evening, while taking out trash, he waved awkwardly. To his shock, all four instantly raised their hands, mimicking his exact angle and motion. Their smiles stretched too wide, teeth perfectly aligned like identical copies. That night, sounds came through the walls, soft tapping, as if fingers drummed on the fence. Then whispers, faint and layered, several voices speaking the same words slightly out of sync. When he stepped outside, the tapping stopped. But he saw silhouettes in the lit windows next door, each standing exactly as earlier, as if they had never moved. He tried to rationalize everything. Yet deep down, he knew something was off. A week later, he noticed something stranger. The house next door looked slightly different. A window that hadn't existed before now stared from the second floor, glass dark and reflective like an eye. The next day, a new door appeared on the side of the house. It didn't make sense, houses didn't grow. But theirs did. Then came the incident that shattered every excuse he had built. One evening, movement outside caught his eye. The neighbor's children were standing in his yard. No knocking, no invitation. Just standing, faces parallel, staring. Their heads tilted slowly, perfectly synchronized. Before he could move, their mouths stretched open too wide, but no sound came. He shut the curtains instantly, heart pounding. When he looked again, they were gone. He reported it, but officers found nothing and suggested the children must have wandered. Their dismissive tone made him feel foolish. But he wasn't wrong. He had seen it. The next day, something even more disturbing happened. A knock came at the door. When he opened it, the neighbor stood on his porch, smiles fixed, eyes unblinking. After several seconds, the father extended a hand. In it rested a laminated photo of the narrator, taken from outside his home. The angle suggested it was shot from their second-floor window, a window that hadn't existed 2 days earlier. Beneath the image, a date was written, tomorrow. Fear crawled through the narrator's veins. He slammed the door and locked every deadbolt. They stayed for several minutes, unmoving, then left without a sound. From that moment, the stalking escalated. Shadows near every window. Figures standing motionless in the yard at night. The constant feeling of being copied, studied. One night, the lights in the neighbor's house went out all at once. Darkness poured over their property. The narrator felt relief until he spotted two faint glows, eyes reflecting moonlight from the fence line. Then four. Then dozens. More figures than just the family. Were there others inside that house? How many had been watching? He shut his blinds, but the scratching began, the sound of nails dragging across windows, testing every entry point. His home, once safe and quiet, now felt invaded by unseen eyes. Sleep became impossible. The narrator noticed subtle changes in his home. A picture frame slightly shifted. Furniture angled differently each morning. Then he saw a shape flicker in his hallway mirror, his exact reflection delayed by a split second. Something was imitating him, and the imitation was getting better. He considered moving away immediately, packing and disappearing before they could act. But every time he looked at moving listings or tried to call for help, the phone dropped signal, screens glitching with static as if the house next door interfered. Even friends he contacted sounded distant, voices distorted, insisting he was imagining everything. A creeping paranoia took hold. Maybe that was the goal. The neighbors began copying other behaviors too. When he laughed nervously at the news, he heard identical laughter echo through the walls seconds later. When he left a glass of water half full on the table, he noticed 4 identical glasses placed carefully on their windowsill, arranged in perfect alignment. They were collecting parts of his life. He discovered muddy footprints in his hallway one morning, far too large to be from a child and not matching any shoes he owned. They traced a path straight to his bedroom door, then vanished. He wondered if they were already inside more often than he realized. Watching, learning, rehearsing. He tried sleeping with the lights on, but every bulb flicked off simultaneously at 3:07 a.m. sharp. The darkness felt alive. In it, he sensed figures standing around his bed, patient and silent. How long had they been preparing? He felt the night itself closing in, aware that the house had chosen him, and escape was no longer an option. Finally, unable to stand the dread, he decided to confront the house. Maybe if he showed strength, the nightmare would end. He crossed the yard alone near midnight, the grass colder than usual beneath his feet. The house loomed larger than he remembered, as though it had grown. He placed a trembling hand on the new doorframe, forcing himself to look inside. The interior walls pulsed faintly, like breathing. Shadows shifted without a source. The air smelled wrong, metallic and ancient. He stepped back, terrified, and heard something behind him. Turning slowly, he saw the neighbors, standing mere inches away, eyes hollow, faces blank. And then, in horrid unison, they smiled wider than human mouths should ever stretch. The narrator ran. He didn't look back. But even as he slammed his door, he heard them walking, synchronized steps, closer to his home. He knew this was only the beginning. Whatever lived next door wasn't human. And now it wanted him. The narrator barely slept after the confrontation outside. Every creak of the house felt like footsteps creeping closer. He sat awake wrapped in a blanket, lights blazing, watching the curtains for any sign of movement. His mind played images of those impossibly wide smiles over and over, twisting with growing fear. He wondered if they were still outside, waiting. He knew they were watching, learning more about him with every passing second. Morning didn't bring comfort. The sun felt muted, filtered, as if the neighborhood had fallen under a strange haze. The narrator cautiously peeked into the backyard. The fence now had a new gap wide enough for someone to glide through. The grass showed no sign of disturbance, as though the opening had always been there. He tried calling a friend to stay with him, but each call disconnected immediately. Technology itself seemed to avoid offering him help. He hesitated to leave the house, but staying inside felt like a trap tightening around him. He stepped out into the yard, scanning the neighbors' windows. The house next door looked different again, taller, angled, as if its architecture shifted to mimic nearby structures. The new windows multiplied, reflecting light in strange ways that hurt his eyes. He could feel things behind the glass, pressed close like insects waiting for release. He tried pretending everything was fine. He went about mundane tasks, attempting to convince himself the horror could be ignored. But he noticed new details that proved he was wrong. The neighbors now had a dog, or something shaped like one. It moved like a puppet pulled by invisible hands. Its eyes reflected nothing. When it passed by the fence, it paused, tilting its head at an impossible angle, as if studying him. The narrator retreated inside, trembling. Inside the house, the air felt different, heavy. Watching. The reflection in the hallway mirror lagged again, longer this time, movements delayed by several seconds. The reflection's eyes seemed excited, its mouth curling ever so slightly into a smile before matching his expression. He covered the mirror, but he knew the reflection was still there, waiting. As evening fell, lights flickered through the neighborhood, but only his house plunged into darkness. Outside, every window next door glowed bright white, silhouettes gathering. The front door opened slowly, although no one appeared to push it. A faint vibration tremored through the ground. The house next door seemed to breathe. The narrator backed away and heard something above, an attic door creaking open without his touch. Cold air spilled down the stairs. He grabbed a flashlight that flickered weakly, casting jittery beams across the ceiling where shapes crawled just out of sight. The walls themselves seemed to listen, bending their surfaces toward his breath. He ran to the kitchen and saw new footprints on the floor. They matched his own. Only they faced the opposite direction, as if his double had walked backward into the deeper parts of the house. He closed his eyes but saw flashes of images. The neighbors gathered around a table, copying his gestures, rehearsing how to move more like him. A knock echoed from the back door. Then the front. Then the windows. Polite, rhythmic knocks. Not frantic. Not threatening. Patient. Coordinated. They wanted to be invited in. He rushed to lock everything that wasn't already sealed. But his hands shook too much and every latch felt weaker than before. Then came the camera. His phone lit up with a new notification. A video file appeared, unnamed. He played it against his better judgment. The footage showed him sleeping. The viewpoint was inches from his face. It flickered through multiple nights, different angles, sometimes zooming on his eyes. At the end of the clip, the camera panned to the doorway. There stood the neighbors, unmoving, their eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. He dropped the phone, heart racing. That meant they had already been inside many times. They had practiced navigating his home. They knew every path. He spotted movement in the corner of his eye. Standing in the hall was a shape dressed in his clothes. It stood perfectly still, arms at its sides. Its head turned with delayed, unnatural motion. The mouth stretched too wide like the neighbor's. But its face was unmistakably his. An imitation. A replacement. He staggered backward, tripping over a chair. Panic closed around his throat. The copy took one step forward and then froze, as if waiting for instructions. The knocks at the windows grew louder, now in unison. They were ready. The lights flashed once and then a surge of brightness flooded the house next door. The door slammed open. Figures marched out, sliding across the lawn with movements too smooth to be human. They multiplied in rows, silent and determined, their blank plastic-like smiles growing. The narrator considered running. But where could he go? The street felt wrong, bending away as though the neighborhood itself was reshaping. This was their world now. His existence had become their experiment. Every breath he took fed their study. Shadows stretched into his house as the front door creaked open, not from force but from inevitability. The narrator's double stood closest now, watching with empty eyes. The neighbors filed inside, positioning themselves around him like performers in a play. He felt surrounded, cut off from every possible escape. The house next door groaned as if celebrating. Walls pulsed like organic skin, producing quiet, hungry sounds. It had grown stronger by learning from him. It knew how to lure, how to trap. It wanted to replace, not destroy. The narrator was no longer needed. They had copied enough. As they advanced, faces shifting slightly into better approximations of humanity, the narrator felt the air tighten, everything closing in. He tried to scream, but fear crushed his voice. One final thought clawed through his mind. He should never have watched them, never acknowledged them. Curiosity had invited them across the threshold. The last thing he saw was his own face smiling back as the lights went out forever. The neighborhood fell silent, consumed by its newest residents. The next morning, no one questioned why his house now looked slightly different. A new window had appeared on the second floor. A new door near the driveway. Subtle changes that felt familiar yet wrong. Those passing by waved gently at the figure in the window, believing he was still alive and well. But something behind the glass waved too perfectly, and its smile remained fixed long after the hand stopped moving. People assumed the new family next door was settling in nicely. No one noticed the old family had grown by one more member. No one questioned why every night at the exact same time, the lights in both houses flickered together. And no one realized that whatever lived there was already searching for its next perfect neighbor to copy. The cycle would continue, repeating without end. The houses would multiply, the replicas would spread, until the entire neighborhood became a flawless reflection with no original left. The world would never notice the replacement. Perfection always hides greatest terror. In silence, they waited patiently for another chance, another home, another life to imitate and consume. If you hear footsteps matching your own, or see a face too familiar staring from a window that did not exist yesterday, remember this story. Some neighbors are not born, they are made. They take what they observe and perfect it. And whatever you do, never let them learn who you are. They are always watching closely. Like and subscribe for more horror stories.